Thank you, Will.i.am, for joining us today. And I would like to start with how education had an impact in your life, in your personal story. I always find incredibly inspiring when you talk about your life and how it evolved and how you continuously educate yourself. I know that you have even learned how to code more recently. But what was the role of education in your life? All this time.
Education. The education that I received was transformational. I come from a very poor neighborhood in East Los Angeles, predominantly Mexicano, and I got bussed out to a really great school in Brentwood and Palisades for 12 years of my life, 7 to 18, and 11 years. So I went to school for, science and engineering at an early age. So the school that I went to as the school that I went to for elementary was called Brentwood Science Magnet. So they taught us physics and computer science and oceanography. So to be around that type of like all these different disciplines as a, tactile and, project-based learning ever since the first grade to the sixth grade, you then go off to a middle school that has a lot of that, baked into the core of how they teach kids. So, and in my high school years, but I fell in love with music. And then when I had success in music, I realized that kids from inner city shouldn't have to go outside of their neighborhoods to learn. That's just going to make them not value their community, right? Because their community is telling them that the community has nothing to offer. And then, as history has showed us that, these inner cities then become gentrified. And then, they get changed, and the people that live in those communities can't afford it because, one, they weren't educated, two, they never valued it. And then when it gets changed, they can't afford to live there. So I was like, well, how can I transform my community and teach the kids these tomorrow skill sets in the neighborhood? So I started the I Am Angel Foundation in partnership with Lorraine Powell Jobs with our I Am College Track site 11 years ago. And we teach our kids computer science, robotics, and autonomy. But that all came from me going to school in Brentwood, learning the sciences and being inspired by my teachers and my mentors that I wanted to contribute back to the community that I came from to keep the kids there so they love their community and aim to transform it themselves.
That's incredible. And you talk about a lot about digital skills, and I know your Will.i.am Angels Foundation is focused on teaching digital skills to children and kids. And how do you see, I know you have an incredible vision of how digital is changing the world, and how do you today, and especially after all this crisis, the current economic crisis that is enveloping the world, and looking forward, how do you think the role of digital in shaping the world, and therefore the role of digital skills education? So how important is for kids to learn how to code, for kids to be able to contribute to this new digital economy?
It's really important for kids to understand the world that's coming. For them to also understand the world that's here. Because the world that's coming, it's in flux, it's in transition, it's being designed right now. So why not have kids that are going to be smacked and hit by this change to help change it? right? So if you think about like the world we live in today and the disenfranchised kids that come from these neighborhoods, that's because they weren't a part of the change when it was changing. That's because they weren't educated in their neighborhoods about computer science in the 80s. They weren't educated in the 90s. They weren't educated in the 2000s about the mobile internet. And so we all know this new world that's being designed right now, rapidly, forcefully. We need to make sure these kids they understand robotics, they understand AI, they understand autonomy, they understand machine learning, they understand complex algorithms and how to train algorithms so the algorithms benefit them. Because as these algorithms are being trained, imagine built, trained, we all know the folks that are not a part of those conversations. So we all know the folks that are going to be hurt by this configuration because there's bias. So it's really important that we don't repeat the injustice that we have now. So think about the justice system. It isn't like we have people of color that created the laws and uphold the laws. So who gets hurt? The people of color, because they didn't make the laws, and they're not upholding the laws. So why do we want the same thing for machines when machines start judging and become more powerful and suggesting down to how cities are ran and who gets educated? It's super important.
Absolutely. Education has such an incredible impact in social mobility and racial equality. I totally agree with you that if the disadvantaged communities in general don't get access, they don't participate. And if they don't participate in the economy and in the conversation, they don't get to be part of the design. And if they don't get to be part of the design, they won't benefit. So this is, incredibly important. How do you see the role of philanthropy in educating consumers and users of the internet on the advantages? Because the internet can be a fantastic thing that democratizes. A kid that wants to start a band can now start from their homes, which wasn't possible 20 years ago. On the other hand, how do we educate people to the perils of the internet?
Yeah, so if you think about governments of the world have made it really clear that they need help governing the people that live in their countries. And it's the reason why philanthropists are philanthropists. If governments truly did their jobs, there wouldn't be a need for philanthropists, right? Like if governments were educating people equally, I wouldn't have to have started my school in the ghetto that I came from because that job is done. If governments did their jobs, you wouldn't have to have drug rehabilitation programs, because we wouldn't have like a war on drugs that doesn't really get people off drugs. They just perpetuates the situation, and then next thing you know, whatever was illegal 20 years ago is now legal. When what were we fighting the war on drugs for in the 80s in the first place? And the same thing happened in the 20s with alcohol and prohibition. Why did so many people die to keep alcohol illegal, but then it became legal? So government is really great. I'm not hating on government, but it's proven that sometimes it protects the wrong entities. And right now, government's doing a really awesome job protecting corporations, more so than people. So philanthropy in the future, I think, is going to be done. It's going to be like companies' ways to market. I'll call you back. So they would have just kept calling. Sorry.
No problem.
Um,
It's okay. It's okay. We know you're very
I
busy. No problem.
I think if you think of like I look at Salesforce and I'm like, wow, they do a really freaking awesome job doing philanthropy at the core of their company. I and I think a lot of other companies are going to do that because governments are doing a really horrible job making sure we educate folks and prepare them for tomorrow. So I think marketing 101 is going to be done because no one's really looking and paying attention to the advertisement on the phone, and there's and no one's really watching the ads um, after videos. And the way that it used to work, it's not working anymore. So the companies have to reimagine what marketing is. And then if you take a look at like when companies only pay attention to the marketplace and not the community, and it's only about the marketplace and how much money was made, you have communities that used to be skinny to now obese because they don't really care about the quality of life in the community. They only care about their shareholders, and they're not stakeholders in community. And I think that's at the detriment to health and people. And that can't happen too long because just look at America, how obese it is. When we started marketing the shit out of fast food, America wasn't always fat. Black people weren't always obese and diabetic. How could we have been? Because they had to pick healthy slaves. So how can we go from like people that were brought over to help run plantations and work in the field? How could we have been not healthy, obese, and diabetic? That had to have happened at some point in time when feeding folks bad food and low quality in nutrients. That's marketing. Marketing did that. So I think moving forward, companies have to be stakeholders in community and win the alliance of their customer and the consumer, the people that vouch for that company and that product because it does good for community. It lifts up the quality of life in that community. And that's really the if you take a look at all the companies that are thriving and the ones that are questioned, cigarettes, we all know what they are and what they mean to society. And the folks that are buying the product, we all know they're addicts. They're not doing it out of like sheer will. Like we psychologically, Gen Z, they know the difference between a product that you buy because you want and you love and you enjoy it versus a product that you buy and you're addicted to and you have a problem. I don't think those types of companies will exist in the future. The parasitic, draconian companies, and we're going to realize that these big, micro targeting, data, blood sucking, attention sucking companies are the new cigarettes. So the world will change dramatically in this next decade, 20s to the 30s. New types of companies, purposeful companies, because the consumer or the user, that people are a lot more smarter than they were in the jump of the new millennium.
I totally agree. And I think you talk about purpose and purposeful companies. I think to me that also highlights the importance of building societies that have morals and societies that are grounded on human values and that are grounded on knowledge of ourselves and knowledge of what is it to be human and where, it's not just about building wealth, right? We today we see societies, and US is a great example, where tremendous wealth has been created, and yet the human development levels, they're not as high as other societies, like, I don't know, Sweden, for example. So it's not just about the creation of shareholder value or wealth in a society, and not even only about redistributing that wealth, but it's also about how do people think about human values and what is really important to uphold. So I think it's really, really important to highlight that.